brand, just like Coca-Cola. So that's it popped to my mind first. But yeah, bourbon, brandy go really well with Coke.
Okay, fantastic. So, Nkoma, while we are bearing gifts, of course, you forgot about some of us.
You forgot about the teetotalers.
You forgot about the teetotalers, but that's okay. I think this is a gift to the show. So maybe you want to do the honors and tell us what exactly is in there.
So what we have here is a very beautiful wine, which is Mielast 2022 Rubicon. So I happen to have visited the winery and for a wine tasting. I'm a teetotaler by myself. Oh, really? I also don't drink. Okay. But I think when I tasted it, I then started sharing it with lots of people. So today I thought, look, let me bring just 2 bottles to the show. But I am also sticking to the cork, but the proper one, not the one that we are having. I'm sticking to the one that generates income. This one, because the sugar takes on this one. So I'm sticking to this one because on this the sugar here, and as I'm drinking it, I know that there's some money coming into
the fiscus.
Yes.
Well, they are the biggest taxpayer in the country.
Yes, no, they are the biggest. They are by any measurement. Yeah. So look, I'll stick to this one with revenue.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Majgira, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And I'm sure we're bound to enjoy this. But maybe to just start off, we know that you are a cattle farmer, one of the largest in Zimbabwe. Maybe let's start there. Tell us about your farming, experts. I've always known you as a banker. How did the farming come about?
So if you remember, Tinashe, around my last days in the bank, I led a management consortium, which let me say, which attempted to buy the bank with the support of some of the insurance companies here. So I think we were ready to buy the bank. Funding was available, the commitments were there. But I think last minute there was a decision that, look, the current buyers would do much, much better with the bank than management. So I thought, okay, 28 years later, having spent 28 years in banking, 28 years with the then Barclays, if I leave banking, what's the next step? So I decided to go into cattle breeding, actually. Uh-huh. So I looked for a couple of Brahmans and started breeding. So the business started from there. But at some point, I then thought that these guys were milking my Brahmans. So I then decided to buy them some dairy cattle. So I bought 4 initially. Mm-hmm. But they were very high producing cows. And we ended up with some extra milk that we're now selling in Chief, because that's where my farm is. Mm-hmm. And there was some income that was generated. Then we decided that, look, why don't we continue to run the beef business alongside the dairy? And so we bought more cows. But the dairy became much, much more of a better daily cash flow generating business. So we then concentrated on the dairy. Oh. So we now run a dairy with over 3,000.
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong ones slow.
Cows a day, twice a day.
Oh, wow.
Twice a day. At peak, we do just over 1 million liters a month. But peak is normally the cold season because the breeds that we are using, the Holsteins, the Jerseys, are out of Europe, most of them, originally. Mm. So they do well in cold regions. So what it actually means that in winter, that's your peak period for milking, because they are in the most comfortable environment. And when it gets to summer, they don't like too much rain. So if there's too much rain, production goes down. If it's too hot, production also goes down. So we come down to roughly about 750 to 800,000 during the summer season. Wow. But I think we are now producing easily maybe 10% of national production.
Oh wow, that's phenomenal. So what excites you the most? Is it the money or is just the growing of cows?
Look, I think it's the growing of cows. It's always a nice sight, especially when the veldt is green and they're looking healthy. it's always a very good sign. It's like visiting a game park, where when you go and you're seeing the healthy cows and But look, if the business is managed well, there's a little bit of income also that you can generate. But you actually need to manage the business well. Daily, 50 to 60% of your cost is feed.
Wow.
Yes, that's So you have to be able at some point to either generate your own feed or to use the modern methodologies now where you actually, if you don't even feed, you grow pastures. So that's the most effective and most efficient, and most profitable way of running a dairy. You have to grow pastures and then feed the cows predominantly on pastures.
Wow. So how big is your farm? That must be huge.
No, because you are feeding the cows, so you don't need too much space.
Okay.
But the farm is just over 500 hectares. But you don't even fully utilize all of it, because if you are feeding without pastures, but I still have a small part where we grow grass, silage, and many other things to supplement. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Phenomenal. So there is money to be made in farming.
No, yeah. If you're serious and you know what you're doing, so, and I think, and I think, he is, I don't know whether we can say the same for our friends here, but I think it's good that we have a role model of success for him to look up to and learn from.
In farming, yeah. So there's something that I've always wanted to ask you. Especially somebody who had 27, 28 years in corporate and really at the helm, 10 years as CEO, and you had made your money. Why go into government? Because from where we sit, life is better outside of government than in government. Why did you decide that this was the right time to get into government? What's the offer that you couldn't refuse?
You see, it's very interesting because people always ask to say, why go into government? Nobody goes into government, especially for these roles which are of what we call Section 305 roles, which are appointments by His Excellency the President. So it's not like you are called to a formal interview and there are questions that no. His Excellency will do his homework. He will decide whom he wants to put in a certain position, and you are appointed. So it's up to you. You're called to serve your country. You're called to serve your nation. And I'll tell you what happened with this particular appointment.
Yeah, please tell us.
I was actually flying out that Thursday when the announcement was made, because after I left the bank, I also started an equity fund. So I was actually flying out to the UK to meet some investors who wanted to put money into the equity fund. So I was flying into London via Joburg. And I landed into Joburg. I opened my phone. I've got over 500 messages on my WhatsApp message. And I think over 112 messages on my Twitter. And I open and I see there's this popular blue and white. You know that statement. We don't like it in government, eh? Every time someone says that blue and white paper, it's not a very nice one. Because so the same way you get appointed is the same way you get disappointed. So you can be busy somewhere else, and you're appointed. It is excellent because the prerogative. He decides that look, Tinashe is coming into this role. So I opened, and there it is. George Guvamatanga appointed.
So you had no idea whatsoever?
No.
So you're not even consulted?
If you're lucky, you do get consulted, but rarely.
Okay. No one whispers in your ear that I think something is going to happen.
Whispers you can get, but you can always ignore. Whispers were there, but the whispers that came to me, I was tasked actually to say, can you try and identify someone who fits into this role? And I actually gave some names. But I didn't put my own name. I actually gave some names, only to see at the end of the day that it's my name that was on that list.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have a relationship with HE?
This Christmas in Vilnius, you are 5 again.
Okay, so he knew you.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
we had prior interactions, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happens immediately after that? Sorry, we have
Yes.
no idea.
No,
what
no,
happens in government,
let's
so,
that's the-
we actually want to know.
Yes.
So you get appointed, you're flying off, so clearly you have to fly back.
Yeah, so I get into London. I'm supposed to be there for 2 weeks. I get in there. I meet the guys, and they now realize. They said, "No, okay, we then have to have a look at this because we were supporting you." Because I said, "Oh, I'll find someone to run with the fund and whatever." Yeah, that's a story for another day. But I immediately have to come back. Yeah. Now I've got a job. I now have to come back. Yeah.
Wow.
And then obviously, then people from the office were now looking for me to say, okay, here's your office, because it's immediate effect.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what is that transition like? Because the private sector has a certain way of doing business. It's all about the bottom line. It's about growing revenue and sales. It's about doing deals. It's about the bottom line. Whereas in government, I think the aspiration is different. It's a completely different culture as well. So how did you find that from Barclays, a multinational, a listed concern? It was listed, so the holding company
Yes.
listed in the UK. Barclays, at the time that you were CEO, was listed here on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. It's a very commercial enterprise. It's about share price performance. It's about bottom line. And you come into this animal, treasury. What was that transition like?
Look, I would say that there was a transition. Because treasury is about two things, right? Liquidity and prioritization. That's what treasury is about. You always have to make sure that you have the money. And once you get the money, you then have to make sure that it goes into the right places. Or in government, it goes into the most impactful programs. So you will find that from a managing of a treasury is to say, where do we get the money? How do we get the money? And after we have the money, how do we prioritize? Obviously, there's a whole budgeting system, but there will always be other programs that will come, maybe that are urgent. You don't plan for a cyclone, but it will come on your desk, even with a budget. You will not plan for COVID. But if you remember, during COVID, Zimbabwe had one of the best responses to COVID. It's because we are very proactive, and while most of other African countries were waiting for aid funding, His Excellency made a decision that no, we're going to fund it ourselves, and we're going to buy the medicines ourselves, and we're going to buy them from China. And when we started buying the anti-COVID drugs from China, if you remember, the World Health Organization did not actually initially send them off. We'd already put an order. So when the World Health Organization eventually signed off Sinopharm and whatever to say you can supply your drugs, we were already ahead of the queue. That's why we even had now then people from the neighboring countries flying into Zimbabwe, because this Excellency said anyone who wants to be vaccinated will be vaccinated. And we had people coming from neighboring countries, but you almost don't plan for that. It now comes on the table and it has to be prioritized. But what do you find that with government, the systems in government are better than in the private sector. The systems, just in terms of policy, because everything has got a legal backing to support it. So in terms of even the role of an accounting officer or a permanent secretary is defined by the law. The role of the minister is defined by the law. So each and every individual's person in government role is defined, and it's very clear where you start and where you end. The policies are very clear, procedures are very clear, all written down. So just in terms of what we would call standard operating procedures or processes, they are much more better in government than what you would find in the private sector. And also there is also another myth which says, no, in government, people can get there, they remove their jackets, put it on the chair, and go and do the other business. Look, you would never produce these documents if we did that. As you can see, all this. This is all part of the budget. And before that, we had to work on this one.
Yeah.
This is a 652-page document, which is the National Development Strategy 2, which takes us from 2026 to 2030. So this will be an office copy here. So I will leave it for you guys.
Very much.
Yeah,
Lots of gifts.
That's a national development strategy too. So there are lots of very committed and hardworking people, professionals in the government with a very, very high level of work ethic. Yeah, people whom, when we are producing these documents, will be at the printers until 2-3 a.m. to make sure that what we have submitted is what is being printed. So
Oh, the magical winter in Vilnius, where Rudolphs flaunt festive hairdos and your
from the private sector, rarely do people in government leave offices before 6 or before 7. Even myself, it's very rare.
Okay. We'll get into the weeds for that particular matter, because that's not what you said in your unvalidated expenditure.
Yes.
You said something that is contrary to what you're telling us here. In that, you actually said, there is, unscrupulous expenditure, and you couldn't account for it, and But anyway, we'll get into those
we'll get into
later on. But,
yes. But you see, and I will get into the detail. But you see, unscrupulous and unvalidated is very different. Okay. Unvalidated means that expenditure has been incurred outside the normal processes of government. So, for example, we say that any contract above 2 million, from a prioritization perspective, should have treasury concurrence. If that contract is then entered without treasury concurrence, it's unvalidated. It does not mean that it's unscrupulous,
okay,
or that it's fraudulent. It could be, but it's unvalidated. When it then gets validated, it either becomes a normal contract, or we say, look, there are shortcomings, maybe value for money is not. But since you said you've got your questions, and we'll get deeper into it, I'll wait for us to get deeper into that one.
But just one point: in private sector, you get fired.
but in this government, people also get fired.
Unvalidated, expenditure in private sector, you get fired. So we'll get into actually understanding when you have identified who spent this unvalidated expenditure and why it went through. Do these people actually get fired?
The law provides that people get fired, and there are incidences where people have been fired. Okay. But the emphasis that we have carried in the 2025-2026 budget is that there will be zero tolerance. So if you have gone through the document, it really states that we will not tolerate anyone going into unbudgeted expenditure, unverified expenditure, because we can't have this recurring and the impact that it has on the suppliers, who then end up not being paid. I'll give you an example. In 2022, Treasury wrote a circular to all ministries, departments, and agencies, everyone, at the district level, to say that from the period 2018 to 2022, we actually believe that as government, that we had tried to acquire enough motor vehicles to support normal operations of government. Not adequate, not enough, they are more required. But now, because we believe we've acquired enough, try to find your way in terms of running of government with the vehicles that we've purchased. Do not go in the higher motor vehicles. But you will find that departments will go in the higher. And early this year, we discovered that there was 60 million of car hire.
Yeah,
across. Unbudgeted. So it's the same suppliers now who will come to you and say government is not paying. But look, it's unbudgeted, it's unapproved, right? I have to buy food for patients at Paranyatwa, and I have to pay for blood transfusion so that there's enough blood in the country, right? We have to buy sanitary ware for some little girl going to school in Gokwe so that they don't miss school. And then you come and say, but I hired my vehicle. And I said, no, but I don't have the budget for it. I've not planned for it. So when I then prioritize you against blood that is required in the hospitals, sanitary ware required in our schools, it's obvious what I'll pay first.
As you can see, we have a lot to go through, but we'll give this time to what Coca-Cola has to say. So join us in the second segment. Cheers.
I was hoping just to get in a hello, but Daniel beat me to it. You know what? He caught the dub, but little did the boy know he was about to catch an L.
Dips!
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. This is Friday Drinks, and we do have the PEMSEC, and there's a lot that we are discussing. We will get into it. And this segment, what we actually want to do is we want to start with the assumptions of the budget. We want to actually talk about the budget and how the budget came about. So what we generally want to understand is, can you just give us at a very macro level,
Yes.
what your assumptions were in the budget? And then keep in mind that lots of people have called it a tax and expenditure budget, that you're taxing us and you're spending the money.
Okay.
This Christmas in Vilnius, you are 5 again.
Of the budget, which is the macro economic framework. First one is that we are expecting a normal to above normal rainfall season, given the importance of agriculture to our economy, its size and its impact. We are also expecting a stable macroeconomic environment with inflation coming down in the first quarter of the year to a single-digit number, way within the SADC framework benchmark. SADC framework says 5% plus or minus 3. So when I say we are expecting in the first quarter to be within the SADC benchmark, it means that we are expecting inflation of 8% or less. We are also expecting a stable exchange rate, very stable exchange rate, given also the tighter monetary policy that the central bank will continue to pursue. We are expecting some commodity prices like platinum, chrome, and all the platinum-related minerals to go up slightly, gold to moderate, and the current diaspora receipts to be sustained. And I think broadly, but a good agriculture season, okay, which will then result, I think, in a good output of tobacco, of maize, and other agric-related goods. A sustained power generation, because once you have water, we get about 30% of our energy is hydro-driven. And in a bad rain season, that impacts power generation quite significantly. So the fact that we expect normal to above normal rainfall means that we then expect that Kariba we have water. Although, you know, Tinashe, that we don't rely on the water that actually falls directly here.
Yeah.
It's water from DRC and all that Angola basin that will actually impact on the hydrology of Kariba for the purposes of power generation. But we are actually expecting that the current levels of power generation will be sustained. And I think we've just finalized the rehabilitation of Wange 1 to 6.
The Jindal deal.
The Jindal deal. And I think we've signed off now. Everything is ready there. So again, we expect that we should continue to have not enough power, but adequate power to support the current level of
Economic activity.
economic and activity. So those are among some of the key
major-
assumptions. Tourism, I think, will continue to do very well. I think we've also been voted as one of the best
by Forbes.
by Forbes, one of the best countries to visit. So we also expect that the number of tourists coming into the country will also improve. In fact, on tourism, we're always arguing with my friends from tourism, who also argue to say, look, when we do our statistics, they say that I'm missing some numbers. I don't know what your perspective is, but they say that most of the diaspora people don't only come as returning residents, but they are also tourists.
Yeah.
So they say that, look, on your numbers, you are just recording them as returning residents. You are missing that. Then when they come, they don't want to go to Kariba, Victoria Falls. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair enough.
So we are reassessing those statistics. So because if we do include them, then our tourism numbers are much higher than what we are currently reporting. But those are the really.
So the critical assumption that you've made there. So I will take, for example, your idea of a single-digit inflation, stability in the currency, and then when I look at your tax revenue is growing by 18%, and yet you're only expecting growth to be 5%. If you look at it, what it actually is telling us is that government is going to take more of your money than the economic growth that's actually coming in. You're getting a bigger slice of the cake.
No, I don't think that the best way, the standard way to measure tax efficiency or inefficiency, or to measure if people are overtaxed or not, is by benchmarking the tax to GDP ratio. And there are accepted benchmarks for underdeveloped countries, right? Developing countries and developed countries. The highest that we had here in Zimbabwe was in
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong ones
of tax to GDP. I think we were on 18% this year. We've come down slightly to below 17% for 2026. The regional benchmark should be around 22, 25. So when we are trying to assess whether people are overtaxed, that's one benchmark that we use. Another second one, Tinashe, benchmark to also whether people are overtaxed or not, is also benchmarking again with our peers within the region and say, what is the level of personal income tax to total tax, right?
Mhm.
If you go into the region, it's around 35 to 40%. We're on 25. But it also explains the informality that we have in the economy. So for all the arguments that we have on undertaxed, overtaxed, and everything else, and before I actually come to this point, even on income tax, regional average, again, I know you know it, it's 25%. I know you research quite a lot, so I know you would question my numbers if they were wrong. If I was plucking my numbers from my head, I'm quite sure you would question them, because I know that's what you spend your time doing. And the numbers that I have, I know you have them exactly in your head. So that's why I'm confidently saying this number. So even on the corporate tax, regional average again is 25%. So we have actually benchmarked to say, are we overtaxing Zimbabweans? But the reality of it is, we are coming off a very, very low base. So let me give you an example. There's what we call tax expenditures. So at one point in time, tax expenditures are all the goods that we are allowed to come VAT-free, tax-free, everything else. So at one point in time, our tax expenditures were higher than the actual tax that we're collecting. So over the course of the past 2 years, we've really been trying to eradicate those tax expenditures, right? But at the same time, you have to be very careful that you don't overtax business out of existence. You have to manage it. But what then guides us is to say, comparably, are we competitive in the region? Is this normal?
But-
So I'll give you an example of the current debate on using the same benchmarks on the gold royalties. We also benchmarked eventually after the representations from the different mining associations. And we realized that in Zimbabwe, we had gone to the maximum, the highest in Africa. That's not our aim on anything. We want, mostly we want to play within the middle quarter, right? So it means that, look, we needed to rethink and revisit. We don't want to be really associated with the countries that are on 10%. So we actually benchmarked it. There we realized that, no, I think maybe we had pushed.
Are you going to come down to 5% or you're going to reduce it by 0.5? So you move from 10 to 9.5.
I said we want to play on the medium.
Okay.
Yes. So we want to play on the medium. So there we missed our own target. I think it was too aggressive.
So just a point. What we're saying is, why couldn't your tax revenue? So if your tax revenue grows with the level of economic growth that you're assuming, so it grows at 5%. Whatever you collected last year, you just say grows at 5%. It means that you're not coming after us as aggressively as you are. But when you grow at 18%, what you're actually saying is, if the economy is only growing at 5%, let's say it's a cake, and the cake has grown by 5%. If tax is now taking 18% of our GDP, government is now taking a bigger slice of the cake. So all your other numbers are
Yes.
okay, and I agree with you.
Yes.
But our issue is government is now taking a bigger slice of the cake.
No. So it's not taking a bigger slice of the cake. Government is slowly getting its cake that you guys used to eat. Let me explain.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Let me explain. I love this conversation. And let's deal with it. And let's not run away from it until either you convince me or I convince you and the audience.
Sure.
So the 18% growth, Tinashe, does not reflect that we've gone on all our text lines and applied a 20% here, a 15, a 30, and on average, we've ended up with 18% growth. So there is some credit you actually need to give to government and to Zimra. Most of that growth
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong ones slow down your Mac.
it's only 3 or 4 lines which we have reviewed upwards. One of which I say we are now reviewing, which was on the royalties, which we thought maybe we're too aggressive. This is actually coming from efficiency in tax collection. Remember, 2 years ago, we finalized the installation of a new tax collection management system called TAMS, which was supported partly by the African Development Bank, which was actually increased the tax collection efficiency. And because of that, and lots of administrative tightening that we've actually put into place, there is a cake tinashe that is not yours, that you are used to eat, that we are now slowly taking away from you. So it's not about it's not about government getting more of a cake. The cake is still there. It's a nice cake, but sometimes you used to hide part of my cake. Right? Sometimes you would eat my cake before I actually come into the room. But now, because of the efficiencies that are there in collection, tightening of the borders, like if you look now at the Bedbridge border post, we used to lose money there before we put the new border there. But everything there is automated now. So the collection is much, much better. Zinara, same thing, right? We are tightening, we're bringing in new tolls. In fact, if one other statement that you read there was you were talking about private sector versus government. So during my private sector days, one of the programs that I led aggressively when I was still in the bank was automation of revenue collection. So I've pushed that agenda again in government. And in this statement, I've given Zinara up to March to fully automate. And all the other government ministries, department, and agencies up to end of the year to automate revenue collection. So it's really the efficiency where I say, look, but private sector is different from government. Not completely.
Okay.
Yeah, not completely. So there are things that we are picking from the private sector and say, no, why are we collecting revenue manually? Like on the passports. I hardly used to get 300,000 from passports until we automated. There are millions now in the account. Right? Because we have automated. So we are looking at all the key revenue areas, full automating. We're looking at the key leakages like on VAT refunds. Again, we've automated it. We're even looking now at AI for Zimbabwe to say, look, how do we work with artificial intelligence? I don't want someone to have the discretion of looking at this and saying, this is the price of a Coke. You get to the border, there should be a system, AI-driven, which you say, this is the value of the car. I don't want the similar officials to be sitting on the airport with their phones and saying, okay, we see you've got this item here. They Google it. And you start arguing and you say, no, this is the price. No, we are automating that. So those efficiencies are the ones that are bringing in the increase in revenue. It's not that we've increased the taxes at all. We are just benefiting from efficiency, cutting out of unnecessary tax expenditures, and reintroducing on VAT on some of the lines. Because I was looking at it and saying, I was looking at the VAT-free goods. There was asparagus, raspberry, strawberries. Right. So I was discussing with my deputy minister. I said, deputy minister, why should we asparagus and strawberries? Why should they be VAT-free? What should be VAT-free are goods and services and essentials which are used every day by each and every common person in the street. Yeah, so those are where we should remove VAT, but then have VAT on others which are non-essentials. But on essentials, we should not have any VAT. We should not have any taxes on the essential goods. But my answer is very simple. The increase is from efficiency, and the efficiency has made that we are slowly getting part of our cake.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I think about it at a high level, macroeconomically, a lot of the language that comes out of government speaks to stability. And to me, when I think about it in terms of economic growth, it's a euphemism for low growth. And the gold royalty is actually a good place to analyze and think about it, right? So if let's assume we just stick with the 10% royalty, you just increase your collections by 10%, right? Because we're doing about 40 tons a year. Now, a growth mindset says, hey, how do we change this number of gold production per annum from 40 tons a year to 400 tons a year, right? And if we have a vision that can take us to 400 tons a year and drives us to that place, then automatically the state treasury collects 10 times more revenue without actually changing any of the royalty head percentages or other taxes associated with the sector. So you can actually significantly grow government revenue simply by
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong ones
whether it's the 10% royalty in gold or an increase in VAT or an increase in any tax head. What it speaks to is a mindset that's saying the only way we can collect more revenue is to increase the percentages of the individual tax heads. Whereas a growth mindset says, look, we don't need to change any of the percentages. We just need to aggressively drive growth. And if we double the size of any sector, then the revenue coming to the fiscus naturally doubles.
Now, so look, I think we are very much aligned from that thinking. And that's why I brought NDS too. I also leave the national budget, because when you go through it, that will come through very clearly. And that's why the theme of this budget is enhancing drivers of economic growth and transformation. We don't just put these themes now because it's nice English. It has to be reflected in the actual policies that we're coming up with to say, how do we drive growth? And that, look, how do we promote the platinum beneficiation industry? How do we allow them to grow? Right? So let's remove all the punitive taxes and allow them to invest. And they've invested. That's growth. Still, right, in Manize, the policies that we've put into place have allowed them to be established and to grow. Lithium now, we are actually going to have a processing plant here, which will actually process up to lithium sulfate, right? I think it will be ready by the end of next year or so. That's growth, because we have actually sat down with them and give them incentives to allow them to invest. So that growth that you are seeing, even within gold itself, look, we were on 2030, we are going to do over 45,000 tons. But look, that's very, when you look at the level of mineralization we have in this country, it's way too small. Mm-hmm. But there are newer mines actually that are coming through, which reflect growth. And again, I'll give you a good example, Tinashe, just so that I conclude on your argument. 2018, total budget, was 2.8 billion. Revenues, tax revenues, 2.6. Non-tax revenues, 200 million. 2.8 billion. We have now gone to just over 9 billion this year. We are targeting 10 billion next year. That's in 8 years. That's almost a fourfold growth. Mm-hmm. But it does not necessarily mean that we have, over the period, we've increased our taxes by 400%. It just means that the economy has grown, and we've become more and more efficient in how we also collect revenues. 2018, just to address the growth issue, GDP of how much?
16, 17 billion. Yeah,
yes,
those are the numbers.
Yeah. End of 2025, 52. So, so what it actually means is that we have been understating growth, because if you take the average of 5% that we have been measuring, and we said,
well, you've rebased twice.
Once.
Twice. 2018 and then 2024.
I would call the 2024 one a rebasing. Because rebasing and a remeasurement actually, actually different. We remeasure. You didn't sit in our offices, took some computers and started. No, we went back into the market to say, what's the size of the economy? And let me also say one thing about the GDP. They are internationally accepted methodologies. We should confine to the requirements of both the World Bank, the IMF, and the global statistical agencies. We don't just work out with our own methodology.
Let's actually get into that in the next segment. Then let's hear a word from Coke. Thank you. Yeah, this is.
I was hoping just to get in a hello, but Daniel beat me to it. You know what? He caught the dub, but little did the boy know he was about to catch an L.
Dibs!
Thank you very much for joining us again. And this is a riveting discussion with PEMSEC of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, George Guvamatanga, Majigira. Now we want to talk about your GDP growth and why you guys actually believe that the economy.
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong ones slow down your math.
Benchmarking. And I think Rufaro raised a good point about growth. And then you then had a rejoinder around your idea of how the economy is actually growing. Now, we all know from economic theory that growth comes from gross capital formation. Now, if I look at just capital expenditure from government, it's now 2.4% of GDP in this budget that you just presented. If I look at last year, it was, again, I think about 2.5%. If I look at a decade ago, it used to be 5%. So on average, capital expenditure, as far as government was concerned, was 5%. It's actually reduced, and yet you're telling us it's growing. Regional benchmarks, you're looking at around 15, 16%. China, of course, using private sector as well, gross capital formation will be around 40%. Now, previously, you've given us 322 pages of your budget. Previously, you used to be so elaborate on gross capital formation. And what we do every time we get a budget is we put it in our models. Now we have to recalculate to find out what exactly you're doing. You no longer give us this information. So maybe this is a good platform in which you can talk about capital expenditure, because capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP has actually been declining. And so where's the growth coming from if it's not coming from capital expenditure?
Yeah, so I think if you look at it historically, from 2018 up to 2023, it was growing, I think way above 4%. We had a decline in capital expenditure in 2024 because of the drought, because we needed more money to support the vulnerable, we needed to expand more onto the social services. So you can't be building bridges and roads and offices while people are starving. So in 2024, it came down. So I agree with you. So, but we then had to build the momentum now again. But if you look at the numbers of capital expenditure 2019 up to 2023, they were above 4% for the size of our economy, which, look, given where we're coming from, because unlike all the other international benchmarks that you're talking about, those get support from bilateral and multilateral institutions, which we don't have. So everything that you see today in Zimbabwe over the course of the past 7-8 years is from domestic generated resources. We have not gone out to be able to access concessional funding to do Harare Bridge Road, to do Gwaishangani Dam, to do Kunji, Marovanyati Dam, to build all the hospitals that we're building, the schools, the accommodation for government workers. We have had to fund it from internally generated resources. So the 15-16%, those are for developing countries who get support from the bilateral and multilateral agencies. And that's an aspiration. But if you
But historically, we used to be 5%. Your next budget is actually 2.4%. The 2026 budget,
yes,
capital expenditure is at 2.4%.
yeah.
So my question, I don't care about the number necessarily, but where is your growth coming from? If capital expenditure, we all know the theory says growth comes from
yes, the growth
capital formation. But your capital formation, as far as government is concerned, and you're the biggest driver of our economy in Zimbabwe, and it's only 2.4%. So when you say the economy is growing, where is it coming from?
So the economy is growing because if you just look at housing and construction, that's not government has contributed, but there is much bigger spend on housing and construction from the private sector than we've ever seen before. And that's why 3 weeks ago we all ran out of cement. We ran out of cement. It's look because the factories were still churning out cement. But I know there was huge demand for Kunji, huge demand for Gwai Shangani. I think if you move around Harare now, any piece of small land that you see there, but it's not only in Harare, tonight. It's not only in Harare. You travel out of the outskirts, each and every piece of land in Zimbabwe is being converted either into residential, into cluster homes, into retail, into offices. There has been a housing boom that has happened while we were sleeping, most of us. That has quite clearly happened. I think the same can be said about the growth in tourism. I even said, look, we were arguing about whether diaspora is tourism or not. What is the impact of the steel coming out of Manise? What is the impact of the lithium? What is the impact of the growth that we've seen in gold, the resurgence of chrome, coal? So all those have really been driving the economy. You go to each and every corner. There are some that I don't like fuel stations. Those I don't like. But
This Christmas in Vilnius, you are 5 again.
there's a hospital. Every corner there is a private school. Wherever you go. So there is an economy, Tinashe, that we are failing to understand.
But we're just trying to understand.
That is actually driving the growth of the larger economy, and which we have not captured or we have not actually paid enough attention to. Because if you just look at construction, how many people get it? Those are heavy employers. Construction, retail and wholesale, also heavy employers. Agriculture, heavy employers.
Okay,
So I want to segue a little bit and double click on something that you said,
Yeah.
which is support from multilateral institutions. And I think there's two levels to this. So on the one level is something that we've discussed on the show before, which is the fact that one of the challenges that we have in terms of getting multilateral support is the reality of sanctions, the 11 sanctioned individuals and institutions, and also the perception of it. So in certain parts of the world, in certain in the offices of many capital allocators, Zimbabwe is a no-go area because of either the reality or perception of sanctions. And to this, I think that there's a huge opportunity that has presented itself on the global stage with the Trump administration that seems to be much more amenable to doing business with countries like Zimbabwe in a way that was not true in previous US administrations. So I think there's a huge opportunity to have a conversation to deal with the reality and perception of sanctions and Zimbabwe's pariah status in certain circles, and actually have the largest economy in the world come through to Zimbabwe in a serious and meaningful way as an investor.
Yeah. After talking about that, let me just talk about mining. I don't know, Tinashe or Faro, are you familiar with the Fraser Index?
Yeah.
Right. So, do you know that on that index, we have moved from number 20 now to number 10 on the Fraser Index? Fraser Index just to talk about friendly countries to invest for the mining sector, for the mining industry, right? So we have actually moved on the Fraser Index from number 20 to number 10. And number 10 is actually saying it's a go-to place. So the point I'm trying to make here is we have got some structural issues we need to address with the economy. But you see, I've said this before on another platform, and to say when the Second Republic came through, what we did find was a patient who has been battered and involved in a very, very bad accident. Broken legs, broken limbs, bleeding all over the shop. Right? Damaged face, everything. So first, you stop the bleeding. Isn't it so?
Yes.
That's the first thing you do. Stop the bleeding. So we stopped the bleeding. And I'll tell you where the bleeding was coming from. Fuel subsidies alone, before we revised the fuel price, do you know how much it was? $70 million a month on fuel subsidy, which we couldn't afford. That's 840 gone. And as a government, then before the Second Republic, we're very smart people. What did we do? We would go into the market, borrow, right? What do we do with the borrowed money? Go and buy maize, wheat, soya beans, stock it up at GMB, 1 year supply, and wait for the private sector to drive their trucks as and when they wanted it. Who incurs the debt? Government. Carrying cost? Government. Who takes the margin?
Private sector.
Private sector. But we're borrowing to do that. That's bleeding. Unnecessary bleeding. Right? We were buying, and not only that, there was a 32 million cost there because we would buy the maize higher from the farmer, sell it cheaper. You know it.
To the miller, yeah.
To the miller.
It's a huge subsidy.
To the extent that, you know what ended up happening? We then had people who, everyone became a miller. But you just needed a license and a 30-tonner truck. You register your milling plant in Bindura. You go to GMB Bindura, get the maize, drive to GMB Aspidale, sell the maize. So in Bindura, you're a miller. At Aspidale, you're a farmer. But you're neither of the two.
You're just a fraudster.
Yeah. No, but look, you can't blame the people. If as a government you're not smart enough.
Oh, the magical winter in Vilnius, where Rudolph's flaunt festive hairdos.
Arbitrage. Why do you blame
People
the people?
take advantage
Take
of
advantage. So that was all bleeding that we had to stop. Then from there, you now say, let's fix the limbs. And you now have your patient now standing up. Then you go to the next stage. That's why I'm saying that, look, it has been a very long journey. Because you see, we have got very short memories. Yeah, we have got very short memories. Because in the past, look, we will not be sitting here. We'll be sitting in our cars in a fuel queue somewhere, or in a milling meal queue, or in a sugar queue, or in a queue. We queued for everything. Yeah, that's that. So we then had to fix that. Then once that has been fixed, you say, which is
What
the
else
next
can we
stage?
do?
Yeah, what else? What else can we do? What else requires fixing? We actually believe now that where our economy is, that's why I'm here today, because we need this conversation now with the business, with the private sector. We are actually not enemies at all.
Absolutely.
We need to collaborate now and say, how do we take advantage? Look, our minerals, we are barely mining what we have here. Barely. Yeah, barely. But again, we actually need, again, us in government to also remove the thinking that an investor has to come in by plane. Yes, that if you don't fly in, you are not an investor.
So I'm glad you talked about wasteful expenditure, especially in agriculture. So there are two issues I want you to address as far as agriculture is concerned. So the first one has to do with your assumptions
Yes.
of the economy
Yes.
when we look at 2026 budget. Like I said, we took the budget and we literally put it in our models.
Yes.
And what's coming out, again, as a point of correction, whoever did the budget, previous years you would give us a table where you tell us exactly how much grain you think we're going to produce. And then these are your assumptions. So for example, grain, the last time you did this was actually in 2024. 2025, we had to assume. 2026, again, now we have to assume. But 2025, you were expecting grain, maize grain, 2.3 million metric tons.
Yes.
But we know from the ground that actually we only produced about 1 million, right? And then now this time this year, you didn't write that. All you did was to give us a growth expectation as far as maize is concerned. But when we work the numbers around, your growth is agriculture based. And it will turn out that agriculture becomes the largest sector in our economy when we just look at your 2026 numbers, which is actually not true on the ground. But we can't really argue with you because you didn't give us the information, which you used to do. But this time around, we don't have that information. So the first question I want you to ask, I want you to tell us directly, because you worked with the numbers. How much maize are we expecting in 2026 in terms of metric tons?
In 2026, we would expect a minimum of 2 million tons.
2 million tons,
Yes.
minimum. If we, on the ground, why I'm saying this, why it becomes an expenditure problem for you,
Yes.
it's because if you say you're expecting a minimum of 2 million,
Yes.
it means you're going to spend a whole lot more as far as seed, fuel, and everything is concerned.
As
Fair?
government or as the private sector?
Well, as government, because there's another 388 million US dollars that went to, that's unvalidated expenditure around Fumbuza.
No, that's validated.
In your document you gave us, which is unvalidated expenditure, between 2022 and 2024, there's 388 million around Fumbuza.
Around, I would want to tie it around Fumbuza, but you are right from your understanding. This would be around the social benefit schemes. And Fumbuza is part of them, but it's not just the Fumbuza. So I don't want to
mix the two.
Yeah.
Okay, no, fair enough.
But on the aggregate number, that's correct. And why do I say unvalidated? Because I know we'll get to that conversation, which is the debt conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe let's leave it until we get
then.
to that.
Okay.
So that we don't mix the two.
The two. But what I'm trying to say is you're expecting minimum 2 million metric tons.
Yes.
So it means that you're going to spend, in terms of support for the farmers, a certain number of dollars.
Yes, but not to produce the 2 million, because there's private sector, there's contract farming.
That's true.
Yeah.
But the actual on the ground, people are expecting that this season will be somewhere around 1.2, 1.5 if we're extremely optimistic. Why I'm saying this is because it comes back to your growth model. That your growth model, you're using numbers that are fictitious. Now, this is not yours, so that's why I can attack this one. But I want to hear what happens in cabinet. Well, you don't know what happens in cabinet, but you can give us an idea. That when Ministry of Agriculture is coming up with these numbers, what are they basing it on?
Okay. You see, there is previously, what used to happen? But we now have in the government what we call a whole of government approach. So the Minister of Agriculture used to come up with their numbers, right? They have their numbers. I would send out Zim stats to do the numbers for the budget. And I always used to have different numbers. And that's not good. So we then agreed that, you know what, this is a new dispensation. Can the Minister of Agriculture and Zim stats now work together? So we do 3 rounds of crop assessment, right? First crop assessment, second, and then the third after the harvesting. To actually then, one is on the planned hectarage. Secondly, it's on the actual maize that is on the ground. Then thirdly, it's after the harvesting. But now Zimstats and Minister of Agriculture work together to actually get those numbers. So those are the numbers that we put in our budget. But that crop assessment is actually a public document, right? So now why we don't include it, because there's actually an actual document which just deals on crop assessment, which I will also send to you, I think on Monday, which just shows the results of the crop assessment after harvest. So it goes detail by detail into the different provinces and the hectarage, what was grown by the contracted farmers, grown by ADA. Because at the moment now, ADA is one of the biggest contributors into maize, wheat, because we are now using ADA as almost the strategic a grain producer for the country, all the other farms.
I've always been curious about this, looking at agriculture post land reform, and since agriculture seems to be, critically important in terms of the national strategic plan. So, one of the obvious success stories of land reform is tobacco, right? The last season we produced record volumes in terms of millions of kgs of tobacco, and the revenue was also at record highs. And yet, if you juxtapose the performance of tobacco in agriculture with maize production, right? So in the last 20 plus years since land reform, except for 1 year, we've been a net importer of maize. And yet maize, much unlike tobacco, has benefited from command agriculture and all these government schemes that pour these inordinate amounts of money to support farmers in that space. And we seem to consistently punch below our weight. I think our yield per hectare in Zimbabwe today averages less than 1 ton a hectare. The South Africans are doing 20, 25 tons a hectare. And the more productive commercial farmers in Zimbabwe, I mean, not to paint everyone with the same brush, but they've shown that you can actually consistently do 5-8 tons a hectare. But our average is really appalling. So from your perspective, how do you explain that gap in performance between tobacco, which doesn't get government subsidies or support, and maize, which every year gets literally hundreds of millions in government support, and we're punching below our weight there?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is the policy decision that we have taken on genetically modified seeds. And when you talk about the 25 tons per hectare in neighboring countries, it's actually driven.
That's GMO, sure.
By GMO, yeah. And so I think it's another debate that we need to have to say, okay, what's the impact? Should we, for now, that's the policy that we have. Although, look, if you then import finished products from most of these countries, you still end up with the GMO anyway.
Yes.
Although now it's a process,
and we import a lot of stock feed. We import cereals.
So that's one of the reason really. It's because we stick to the pure breed seed without moving on to the genetically modified. Cotton even as well. Look, those using genetically modified seed are doing 3-4 times more. Even with sugarcane. They argue that maybe we have got old varieties, but I think the newer varieties are also genetically modified. We would do 2-3 times more if we use the varieties. So that's one of the bigger reasons. But also the efficiency we need to improve there. Look, on the efficiency of the inputs that we're allocating out as government. Because I actually don't believe that with the systems that have been there, which we continue to want to modify and change on a daily basis, that all the farmers, then the ones who are targeted by the schemes, end up being the ones benefiting. That's why you're always finding that during this season, the planning season, if you open the newspaper, there's always someone being charged for either swindling or doing something with inputs. It's just
There's a place where the extraordinary is revealed in every moment. In the Canary Islands,
it actually means that not all of the fertilizer in the seed is finding its way on the ground that it was intended to. But I always argue, though, that look, as long as it's not taken outside Zimbabwe, I'm not bothered, though.
Okay.
Because you don't eat seeds and fertilizer. So you have to grow it somewhere eventually.
Yes.
It's only that the beneficiaries are actually not getting it. So the measurements then get a little bit, you can't then get correct numbers to say this is what went into the social benefit schemes and whatever. But the reality, just to answer your question, there is need for massive improvement in the management of those schemes.
Okay. And on that note, we will get a break, and then afterwards, we will get into the debt issue. I think that's the big elephant in the room, and then we'll spend a bit more time with that. So join us in the next segment.
I was hoping just to get in a hello, but Daniel beat me to it. You know what? He caught the dub, but little did the boy know he was about to catch an L.
Dips.
Thank you and welcome back. This is riveting, as I said before, and we're learning a lot from what Treasury actually does and how they manage our affairs. So, like I said, the biggest elephant in the room is what government actually owes, and I want to maybe to start off just by laying out the argument so that we hear, at least from a global perspective, what your thoughts are. There's an argument that says year in, year out, your budgets will tell us that there is a minimal budget deficit of less than 1%, usually 0.2, 0.3. If they're aggressive, it's 0.5%. And then 3-4 years later, we hear of a condonation bill. But actually, in those years where we were telling you that the deficit was 0.2, we actually spent more than we had budgeted for. So that was condonation bill. And now we're coming to unvalidated expenditure. By the way, who came up with that term? I find it very funny. Now we have unvalidated expenditures, and this is from 2022 to 2024. It's 1.7 billion US dollars. And so first of all, we just want to understand government's thinking around its stated deficits, and then 3-4 years later, you come up with condonation bills that run into billions of US dollars, or you have 1.7 over a 3-year period, which if you work backwards, it means that our deficits are actually around 15% and not 0.5%. So let's just hear your views on this and thoughts around this.
So, I think the condonation bills were actually products of macroeconomic instability. To be more precise, inflation. So you would present, like we've done this year, a budget to Parliament and say rate is at 7, exchange rate. You anticipate that it will get to 15, right? and then the rest goes to 24. So what a condonation bill or why an appropriation bill would then force you to do is to simply say, when you are going for a condonation, does not necessarily mean that you have spent more than you had. No. It means that you have spent more than what you told Parliament that you would spend. There's also actually been a clear misunderstanding on what a condonation bill is. I want to repeat again. A condonation bill, you are saying to Parliament, on the appropriation bill, which was passed yesterday, you said go and spend 289 billion Zimbabwe dollars, or its equivalent. And I made an assumption of an exchange rate that will apply as an average throughout the planning period of the year 2026. But due to macroeconomic instability, the exchange rate then moves faster and higher than what we planned for. In US dollar terms, we are still spending the same money. But from a legal perspective, I need to go back to Parliament and said, you said I should spend 280 at an average exchange rate of 28. The rate then went to 30 and I spent more. Please condone. It does not necessarily mean that, look, we have spent money that we're not to spend or money that we're not allowed to spend. But again, it was due to inflation.
But what causes it?
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong ones slow.
Right? 2024, there's no condonation bill. We spent, because the economy was getting much, much more stable, our expenditure was way, way within budget. 2025, in fact, there's confusion. Again, we planned with a rate of 36, right? From the models that we had. The average rate has been 26. So again, it actually meant that the actual budget that we have and what we spend is less. So there's no condonation bill. But again, if you look at the numbers from a ZIG perspective, which you have done, and I was looking for you, and I couldn't find you. So maybe I'll bump to you but I couldn't. So if you take the current run rate of revenues, right, and you go back to the original budget was at 36. So whatever US dollars that we're getting, we are translating it to ZIG at what? At 36. So that's the budget that we have. But the actual rate has been averaging 26.5. So in US dollar terms, our budget is 10% above target. But if you actually then take the numbers that are there today, that have actually been earned at 26, compare them to the ones at 36, you will say we are below budget, like what you said. But that's not, it's a translation issue. It's an exchange rate issue. You see? But suffice to say that for 2024 and 2025, there won't be a condonation bill because it was spent in line with the appropriation bill. So in other words, a condonation bill arises, now there's a theory, when the expenditure of government is above the appropriation bill or whatever would have been appropriated by Parliament. But Parliament, again, if you want to go to condonation, if you go into the appropriation bill or the blue book, it says estimates. So there's nothing wrong with the condonation bill. You see, because the blue book itself and the appropriation bill is very clear. It says estimates of revenue expenditure for the government of Zimbabwe for the year 2026. It's estimate. So what Parliament is approving is an estimate. The minister needs, that's why the minister needs to go back twice per year by the law. to advise Parliament of the actual. You see? And where the actual is above, you cordon. You see coordination. If it's below, it's fine. But you can't spend more than what you have been appropriated. But I think we have always operated here to say if there is a coordination bill, it's a crime. No, a coordination bill is not a crime. It's a legal instrument which provides checks and balances on the behavior of the executive.
Well, it's a crime if you don't condone. That's
Yes.
why you're going to
Yeah,
Parliament.
to
condone.
Parliament. So if there's something wrong, Parliament will now say no. But look, why did you then apply the money
Yes,
to
exactly.
new Mercedes Benz
But-
and do because we then have to you go line by line and tell them what was the excess expenditure.
So why not do a supplementary budget within the year? Because remember, economic agents are making decisions. So you know that the exchange rate has moved adversely against you. And then you come in June and you say, you know what? The exchange rate has moved.
Yes.
And we're now doing a supplementary budget. So everybody in the economy plans.
Yes.
But when you come with a condonation bill 2-3 years later, you do exactly what you said, which is you just say it was inflation. Well, everyone has forgotten. We don't know what was happening in
Yeah.
2022.
So
We take your word for it. But if you came during the year and you said, okay, we're going to have a supplementary budget because of these dynamics, that's direct feedback to economic agents within the year.
that's what is supposed to be done, right? But you will find that there was lots of other issues that were there. You see, one of the coordination bills that we still have to get through Parliament is a 2017 one. Yeah. So there were lots of other political issues, to be honest with you, that were behind it, but it's now cleared. But one of the other coordination bill is in a year that was if there was a supplementary budget, but the rates still flew out of the window because of the level of money supply that was in the economy. So even after the supplementary, there was need for a coordination. But the process that you have indicated is the right one.
Okay.
And there is also a time frame, right? Which says that
Oh, the magical winter in Vilnius, where Rudolph's flaunt festive hairdos and
expenditure, you should go to Parliament. So if you don't go within 60 days, we are actually breaking the law. That's why I said that government processes are very clear and very legalistic in nature. So you can't go 2 years later or 3 years. It's 60 days. That's the law. Yeah.
So I want to drill down a little bit on the currency issue. As a capital market player, one of the things that we deal with on an ongoing basis is the reporting of public companies. And our biggest gripe as analysts in the market when it comes to the companies that are listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, the local currency exchange, is that when they meet in management meetings and board meetings to make decisions about their company, they look at US dollar numbers because those are the numbers that make the most sense to them, that they can wrap around their brains, that help them make the best decisions for their businesses going forward. But when they report in the public markets, they report in local currency. And depending on the periods, like certainly for last year and the year before that, those numbers are meaningless. It's just impossible to make heads or tails of them. And, you know, I think that's true of government numbers and government budgets as well. Because if I look at the budget that was announced last week, and I tried to compare it, 2 weeks ago, and I tried to compare it to the last year's budget and the budget the year before that, and I'm looking at all these local currency numbers. I'm not comparing apples to apples. It's an impossible analysis. And yet underlying those numbers, for the last 3 years for sure, the government of Zimbabwe has collected most of its revenue in US dollars, and it spent most of that revenue in US dollars. So my question is, don't you think that it would be helpful for the market, for everybody to be more sympathetic to where you guys are coming from as government, if you reported the underlying numbers to say these are the US dollar numbers, right? And then we're not guessing to say, oh, okay, well, there's a condonation bill, and it seems like what's being condoned is double what was what was announced in the actual budget. What is going on? Did we spend double what we were supposed to, or actually it's just macroeconomic circumstances, it's inflation? I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe we would be better off if you reported the underlying numbers, the underlying US dollar numbers. If you received certain revenue in ZIG, report the ZIG numbers. What you received in US dollars, report to the US dollars. And then we will do a much better job in analyzing those numbers. And we are much more likely to understand where you're coming from and even be supportive of a lot of the things that you're doing. But part of the reason why I think, there's this perception that the private sector has a hostile bias towards the numbers that come out of the state, is because we don't understand them. It's very difficult for us to work with them.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad that issue is gone, and it will never come back. It will never come back because we will never go back to that place again of hyperinflation, uncontrollable inflation, uncontrollable exchange rate. It will never, ever, ever happen again. I think as a people, we have learned basic economics.
After 2 bouts, for sure.
Yeah, we have. So it will never. So this stability is sustainable, right? And there is actually commitment to say we will not make the same mistakes again. But also if you go into this budget as well. So 2024, 2025 budget you can compare. But if you bring in 2023, then you are confused. Right? But 2024, 2025, you can actually put them side by side. And I can tell you that 2026, you can put 2024, 2025, 2026. And that's why even within the budget, we have actually gone up to 2028 in terms of our planning. So even here in the budget, we provide both the ZIG and the US. You see it? Yeah. Revised fiscal framework, ZIG, US. Because we also want that readability and easy of understanding of our numbers, not just to throw numbers which are meaningless and which people can't relate to. So even for the companies, I think, look, all this inflationary reporting accounting, I think the accountants will start to rest from next year.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So you said it's a thing of the past, that's condonation, but we have this thing called unvalidated arrears. And that's 2022 to 2024. You haven't done the exercise for 2025, so we expect this number will be more. Please explain to us, what is unvalidated expenditure?
So there are certain requirements that should be satisfied by ministers.
Some cookies sweeten your holidays, while the wrong one